What's up, guys? Justin here with the RenderingEssentials.com, back with another SketchUp and Enscape tutorial for you. So in today's video, I wanted to just kind of have some fun, and one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to take some scenes that I've seen in the past and see what I can do with them with the lighting tools and different rendering programs and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so one movie I've always really loved is the movie Lord of the Rings. And one of the things that I always thought would be kind of fun is to try to create kind of one of the scenes from the movie where they're in a deep mine and they're kind of walking through and everything's dark. And I just wanted to, in this video, see what we could create with that. And so what I want to do first is I'm in SketchUp, and the nice thing about SketchUp is you can download different models from the 3D warehouse. So, like Gandalf the Grey, who we're going to bring in a little bit later. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a search for Moria, and Moria is the name of the mine that we're looking for. And you can see how there's actually a mine in here, or an image of this in here, that we can bring into our model. And so what I want to do is I want to click on this, and you can see how this is Moria by Ali Demir Dovin. I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong. So it's a really cool model, and I just wanted to bring that in and see what we could do with it. So we're going to start off and we're going to click on the button for download, and then we're going to load this directly into our SketchUp model. And the nice thing about this, well, first of all, it's not modeled on the axis in here, which I kind of wish that it was. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete out that default model, and we're going to double click in here, and we're going to bring this up to the origin. So you see how the component bounding box gets smaller when we do that. That's just so that when we double click inside this isn't going like way off in the distance or doing any weird stuff like that. And so what we want to do first is we want to kind of think about our scene. And so our scene is you want to have someone standing right here on the ground with this big long cavern going off in the distance. So you can see this kind of big long hallway that then we're going to light. And so the first thing you can see is if you were to come in here in first person view, there's not really enough columns in here to make this look like a big long cavern. I mean, it looks big, but it doesn't look that big. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to make a copy of it using the move tool in copy mode. So I'm just going to activate the M key, click on this corner, and tap the control key to create a copy. And I'm going to create another copy of this down here. Well, now if we go stand in here, this feels like it stretches off into the distance a lot further. And so we can kind of visualize what this is going to look like by putting our camera in the position that we're going to want. And so we'll go ahead and leave that like it is for right now. The other thing I'm going to do is take both of these and just put them in a group. I'm probably also going to save a camera view just because I'm going to come back to this one a bunch. So I'm just going to go to View, Animation, Add Scene. And so the first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and run Enscape and see what this is going to look like. And obviously this is not going to look very good or very realistic because it's just sitting in the exterior right here. But we can kind of use this view as a checklist of what we need to change. First of all, I'm fairly happy with the texture that's applied to these. I mean, it does kind of repeat, but you can't really see it because of how small the faces is, so that's a good thing. But what we need to do is we need to close this off so that we don't have light coming in. And then the other thing we're going to need to do within Enscape is we're going to have to turn this to nighttime. So we'll just turn this to nighttime in a minute. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close out of Enscape, and I'm going to draw a box around this, at least on 3 sides for right now. So I'm just going to activate the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to draw a box that starts on this corner and ends on this corner. And all I'm doing is I'm just blocking external light, but also giving this something that the light can bounce off of. So, and depending on how visible this is going to be, you may want to apply like a stone material or something like that. So, in fact, why don't we go ahead and do that? We'll just sample these materials off of this stone, and we'll just apply it to these faces. And if it's something that you're going to see a bunch of, we might want to adjust this because you can see how this is just tiling on this face and it doesn't look very good. But for what we're doing, this is actually going to be pretty low light, so it's probably not going to be that big of a deal because you're not really going to be able to see it. And so now if we were to go back into Enscape and hit play and render this again, you can see how this is looking a lot better with the background in here instead of the open space. And then I'm just going to hold the shift key and click and drag my right mouse button until we get to a dark time of day. So really you want this to be somewhere around like maybe the like 20 or 19. Like you don't want to see anything in here. You can see how we've got a little bit of sunlight out there, but it doesn't appear to be getting into our scene, so that's totally fine. So then we're going to close back out of this and we're going to start adding some lights. And so one thing I would recommend with a real-time renderer like this is if you have a second monitor, it really helps to be able to make the changes in your first monitor and then see the changes on your other monitor. So I'm going to do the monitor split thing here, or the split screen thing here. But the first thing I want to do is I want to add some sort of light in here. Just something to give us kind of an idea of what the illumination is going to look like, kind of a baseline. And so in Enscape, to do that, you click on Enscape Objects. And I'm going to start, and I'm just going to add a simple sphere light. So this is just going to be a light that just sits in a point in space. And I'm just using this to start off to give me kind of an idea of scale and also the way this is going to look. So you can see how when I drop that light in, that's going to illuminate part of this scene. And we can adjust that by clicking and dragging this slider. So you can adjust how bright that is. And you can see how when you make that really bright, you get kind of a lens flare effect and all of that. So our point light is going to sit about where our main character is going to be, because we're probably going to bring in like a Gandalf, the wizard model or something like that, something that's going to kind of light everything up. So that's kind of what we're going to do in this case. And let's go ahead and do that first. So we'll just go up to the 3D warehouse. So we'll go to File, 3D warehouse, and I'm just going to do a search for Gandalf. So when I do that, there's a few different models in here that you can use depending on what you're looking for. A bunch of these are kind of flat models. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to this Gandalf the Grey by Brissinger 117, just because it's actually in 3D. It's not like a two-dimensional face me component, because we want this model to kind of face away from the camera. And we're going to place this model about where this point light sits inside of SketchUp. So, and you can see how this comes in with a default model, and I'm going to go ahead and erase out the default model, and I'm just going to make some quick changes to this. So I'm just going to take this model and I'm going to rotate it so it's facing the other direction, kind of like this, and move it back a little bit, maybe over, because it's going to be off to the side in our scene. And then I'm going to take this sphere light and I'm going to kind of center it on the end of his staff. And so you can see how what that's doing right now is that sphere light is now centered on his staff. And I'm going to brighten it up a little bit just for right now. And you can see how that's kind of centered on his staff, and that's kind of lighting the scene to a certain degree. You can see how all of this light is kind of concentrated to this one area. And so one thing I'm going to do really quick is I am going to adjust this staff, because right now if you look at your image, you've got this point light in here, but if you really kind of zoom in on it and you really kind of fly in, it doesn't really look like the light is emanating from that very much. Really the only light you're seeing is where this is running, where this is intersecting with the faces in this model. And the reason for that is because your point lights in Enscape are going to be invisible. You can't see them. And so what we want to do, and I'm going to move this point light just a little bit out of the way. We could also hide it. But what I'm going to do is if I kind of zoom in on this point right here and then double click, you can see how there's a number of different little like flat planes in here that are kind of here to make up that effect of the light. And so what I want to do is I want to apply a material to those, and I want to create an emitter. And so in order to create an emitter, what you need to do is you need to apply a material to something, and then you need to tell Enscape that it's an emitter. So to do that, in this case, I'm going to go down and I'm going to find something like maybe this color M0 or M01 and just apply that to these objects. So you can see how now that's been applied in here to these different objects. And this isn't necessarily my ideal way to do this, because this is a bunch of flat planes in here, but it's going to be okay because we're going to make this an emitter and you're not going to be able to see it super clearly anyway. So you see how it looks kind of odd right now, and it's lit up, but it's lit up because that point light is shining off of those faces. Well, that's not what we want. What we want is we want to go into our Enscape materials, and we want to find that white material. So we're just going to go up to our colors in model, and we're just going to find that white material that we just applied. We can just sample it in order to do that, I think. And somehow we've applied the lace's sole material to this, but that's okay. We can go ahead and make that our emitter. So we've got this material, and we're just going to click on the button for self-illumination. And you'll notice when you click the button for self-illumination, now those materials inside of Enscape are actually emitting light. And so you can adjust the slider to adjust how much it's emitting light. You can see I can use this to kind of light my model and to kind of create that effect inside of Enscape. So now, if I fly back a little bit, and so this is one thing I'm coming back and making a note after the fact. The reason I'm getting weird shadows right here is because I didn't do a very good job of making sure that every one of these faces got this material applied. So when you have a situation like this one, just make sure that you apply that material to both of these faces. And then the other thing is I'm also going to take this point light and kind of move it up so any shadows that are being cast aren't being cast like way away from this onto the wall where it looks weird. So back to the video. Thanks, guys. And you may want to do this a little bit differently depending on how realistic you're trying to be with your shadows in this case. For right now, I'm pretty good with what this is doing because what we want is we just want a figure in here that has a light casting off it here. So what I like about this render is up until about this first column here, we're really kind of casting the light, but there's no light moving any further down the corridor. And so you can't really see this giant grand hallway or anything like that, which I think is something that movie people run into a bunch. Like you're trying to show a dark scene, but then if it was really dark, you wouldn't be able to see anything. And so what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and add some lights down the corridor inside of SketchUp. And so there's two different ways that you could approach this, I think. One way is to try to do this with Enscape's rectangle lights. You could definitely do that, but I'm just going to go straight around that, and I'm going to add a big rectangle face like this one. And I'm going to add kind of an orange color to it, and I'm going to make that an emitter. So I'm going to take an orange color like this B05 and apply it here. Then I'm going to select it, and then in my materials section of Enscape, I'm just going to make this an emitter. Well, now, if you look down this hallway, you can see how we've got our figure right here with the bright light, and then you've got this kind of glow going on in the background that kind of indicates that there's like a door down here, maybe some steps leading down to like some kind of a dungeon space or something like that full of lava. And you can adjust this to make that as strong or as weak as you want. So you can bring the illumination value down in order to make that more of a subtle thing. So there's a lot of different just playing around with your different settings. So another thing we might do if we wanted this to extend a little further down is I don't necessarily want to take this object and just copy it, because if I just copy it, right, if I make a bunch of different copies moving this down my corridor like this, you know, times 7. So if I make a bunch of copies, then this all kind of gets lit up back here, and it just doesn't look quite the way that we want it to look. Well, what I'm going to do instead is, first of all, I'm going to take this wall and hide it just so I can get in here and work on this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this be my primary light, and then maybe a little further down, like maybe like one section or something like that, I'm going to have a smaller light like this one, or a smaller emitter. Then I'm going to erase this. And then right here, I might even create a smaller emitter right here. So what I'm doing is I'm still creating this light in here, but it's kind of falling off. You can see how I've got the big emitter right here, and then a smaller emitter, and a smaller emitter. And what that gives us is that gives us the illusion that there's a really bright point right here, and the light is kind of falling off as we go. And so you can tell that this kind of adjusts a little bit as you fly your camera around, and you may have to change some of the settings in here to really get the look that you're going for. But one thing I might think about doing is maybe bringing the value of this point light and this emitter on my Gandalf down a little bit, because this is going to be a little bit bright. So I may take this object and adjust that using the objects, or the Enscape object section, and just bring down the brightness on this a little bit. So so there's two different things that are happening here. So these shadows that are being cast and the distance at which they're being cast are being driven by this Enscape point light, and then the brightness that you're seeing right here is being driven by the brightness of the emitter material. So I kind of have to go in here and adjust both of them a little bit, so you can see how I can bring that down, just so it isn't quite as bright and it doesn't like overwhelm the entire scene right here. And so I might come in here and play around with my orange color a little bit more, and that's kind of the thing about creating a rendering like this, is there's a lot of just like messing around and seeing if you can create the look that you're going for. Like I might move my Gandalf model over here. So we're just kind of seeing what kind of look we can create here by doing this. And I'm going to reapply a stone material to this back wall. So that makes a big difference in the way that the light bounces off of this. But you can go back in and you can find this orange color, and you can adjust how luminous the color is, like how bright this is. Like maybe you want this to be a dimmer color, maybe you don't, but you can see how you can easily adjust this inside of Enscape. And then probably what we would do at this point is, one thing I would like a little bit more of is I would like a little bit more light, because probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to back my camera up a little bit, and I would like a little more light kind of shining right over here on the right hand side. So just because we've got all these columns in here and you can't really see them inside this rendering, so what I might do is I might create like a rectangle light or something, like maybe back here, that's going to just kind of shine on this whole scene and illuminate these a little bit. So kind of a filler light. And so all we would do is we would just activate the rectangle light inside the Enscape objects, and we could just drop this light in here. And the one thing I like about these is you can really kind of set the direction that they're facing. What I don't like is they're limited in size. And so what I mean by that is I can come in here and I can make these as big as I want, up to about 3 meters. So you can see how up to about 3 meters I can cast some more light in here. You know, but then once we're beyond that 3 meters, you can't make it any bigger, which is why I've been really kind of using the emitters over here instead of the rectangle light. But you can see how you can adjust this, and you can make this as bright as you want in order to try to cast some light in here. And for some reason, this just doesn't seem to be casting very much light. You can see how it adjusts a little bit as I move it around, but it's not really casting the kind of like soft light that I would necessarily like. I just want it to be kind of a filler light is all I want it to be. So I think I'm just going to use an emitter again here. And there's a lot of programs where using an emitter maybe isn't the best idea. So because a lot of the time in a lot of programs, it kind of makes everything run slow. An emitter will. But in this case, in Enscape, emitters don't really seem to slow down your renderings very much. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to apply another kind of white material, just something like this maybe, and I'm going to make that an emitter, but I'm going to crank this luminance way down. Like I just want this to be just enough to give me a little bit of filler light in here so that I can see this space that I've created. And even this isn't necessarily doing quite what I want it to. We might have to come in here and add a couple of these lights. But you can see how all this is just filling in different lights and seeing how you like them, and then adjusting and making this look the way that you want it to look. And so probably the last thing I would do is maybe come in and mess around with my settings a little bit. So see if I can get like if I click on this button for Enscape settings, you can adjust things like the exposure brightness. You can adjust how bright everything is, which is also going to affect how much you can see in your background. So if you wanted this to be really dark, you could kind of bring this exposure brightness down. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. You could also adjust your field of view. So like for example, if you wanted this to be a really big shot that really kind of takes in this whole grand thing, you could adjust your field of view wider so that you could see more. But if you wanted this to be more of a, you know, kind of looking up and making Gandalf look small, you could kind of reduce this a little bit and kind of make this look a little bit tighter, where you're looking up above your figure. So you can kind of do whatever you want with that. And then there's other things you can mess around with that work to a varying degree. Like you can adjust depth of field. So if you wanted, for example, you wanted your focus to be kind of in the background, you could adjust your focus settings. You can see how this is actually a really cool thing in Enscape where you can adjust where your focal point of your camera would be if you turn off autofocus. So you could set this so that your depth of field effect is really strong, and then you kind of focus on this background here, or you could do it the other way where you could adjust your focal point to about right here, and then adjust your depth of field so you're really kind of focused on your figure right here instead. So lots of different things you can do with that. I recommend just kind of playing around with it a little bit, seeing what you can do, what you like, that kind of thing. And then once you're done in Enscape, all you have to do to export an image is just type in Shift F11 and it'll export an image to your default image folder. So once you export that image, you can go find it. You can kind of take a look at it, see if you like the way that it looks, if you like what you've created, that kind of thing. So obviously there's a lot more things you could do to make this more photorealistic, things like that, but this should give you a good baseline for some things you can do in order to start creating a scene like this and start playing around with this. I may create a similar video for something like this in Lumion. I haven't really decided yet. I'm not sure how well that would fit, but I may play around with that as well. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Did you like this? Was this helpful? I enjoyed making this video. I may want to do more like this, but I'd love to hear your feedback as well. If you like this video, please remember to click that like button down below. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.